Did you attend the international conferences? Like the one that happened at KICC?
Yes, I did not attend there. That was the time I had finished university, I had married, we had a child. Our little Omid at that time was 1 year old, and we were investigating where to travel, where to pioneer and settle. And my father happened to come to that conference. And then he felt that Kenya was such a lovely country. He actually enjoyed visiting some friends in that conference, and also became friends with many and visited as far as Kisumu and some areas nearby. And he was suggesting to us that try Kenya. And that's when we wrote to the pioneering committee in Kenya and asked if there was any possibility for us to come here and settle and serve. Yeah, so there is a connection there is a connection that I think the desire of coming to Africa started from the love of pioneering by my parents. So, okay, so my name is Shahnaz Kassiri. I come from a family back in Iran whose literally everyday talk and desire was to pioneer to Africa. So the love of this continent was planted in my heart very deeply. And as soon as we finished studies, we set off our journey. And the country that we came to start with, as we were advised, to start from one country and see if you can find a job, if you can settle, if not, move to another country and another country. So Kenya was the one that we started landing in. And we stayed in Nairobi for about over 1 year. But our desire was to go to a part of Kenya where our services were more needed. And then a suggestion came to go and settle in Nakuru. We arrived to Kenya in 1981. Yes.
It's 7 years before I was born.
So you really have to respect the Edward. I didn't know that I'm that much older than you. I come from Shiraz. Yes, yes. And I think I was very blessed to live very close to the House of the Bab. And many weekends, one of the first things we would do, we would go to the House of the Bab, of course early in the morning when it was less dangerous from the sight of people who lived nearby the house. And every time I went there, my first prayer was, Baha'u'llah, show me the way to find the line of my service and the country or continent where I should go. Because at that time, what was the talk all the time was on pioneering. So as youth, I never thought that I would live where I was, even though Shiraz is one of the most desirable places to live in. But I always thought that I would have to go pioneering somewhere in the world. And that was one of my first prayers all the time in the House of the Bab, to be guided where I should go.
It happened in Kenya.
Happened in Kenya. Well, one of the beautiful stories I have is when we arrived to Nairobi. It was afternoon, and I was very excited to land in Africa. It was a whole life dream. Yet I was very anxious and worried because we came with no prior job, visa, any preparations. We were told to come to Africa and start from Kenya, look around and see if there is any possibilities. If not, you can go to the next country and next country until finally you find. Those days communication wasn't strong enough to make these preparations. So arrival to Kenya, in other words, arriving to Africa, was a mixture of excitement, a dream come true, and also anxiousness to know how we're going to settle, what are we going to do. And so we came straight to Bahá'í Center in Nairobi. And I literally clearly remember the spot. As you come out of the parking, climb up the steps, right on top of the steps before you enter the guest house. At the time, the Secretary of National Assembly, Mr. Bafula, came and we introduced ourselves, and he shook my hand. He said, Aloha pa, aloha pa, aloha pa, aloha pa. And it went on and on, and his hand was so loving and kind and warm, but very heavy. So I literally was, aloha pa, aloha. So honest to God, maybe for 50 times we said aloha pa. By the end of that big, long greetings, every anxiety was off. And I felt that I have come to the continent that I'm supposed and I'm meant to live in. That was the best welcome one can ever give, by shaking hands strongly.
Oh my God.
Well, one of the interesting things that happened is that the following day after we arrived, I saw, it was Saturday, that I saw a group of children coming to the Baha'i Center, and a couple of teachers. Among one of them was an American lady, pioneer here, Debbie Christensen. And then I saw her with a bag bigger than herself, arriving to Baha'i Center and having a children's class. And that was another beautiful welcome, because the children's class was wonderful. And there were a mixture of children from, now we call them sectors, but from all over Nairobi. And it was a wonderful children's class. And I think that was very, very interesting start. I remember very soon I was asked to help and serve in National Child Education Committee in Kenya. The same year that we arrived, it was 1981. And I was asked to address the group. It was a number of teachers sitting there. It was teacher training. So I didn't have any books with me. I was very, very new to the community. So I had brought with me a book, a notebook actually. And in that notebook, I had written some interesting things from different books, because we couldn't carry these books with us, knowing that we had to carry 2 suitcases and come, and God knows how long will it take us to settle anywhere. So a part of my notebook was some writings. And in that writings, one of them was emphasis on how do we train our children from beginning. We are firm and loving with them in every aspect, firm and loving. And so I was reading quickly through my notes that I had handwritten, and suddenly, on top of this, I saw it's written that this article is by Debbie Christensen. Just as I was reading this, and I looked at Debbie Christensen, I turned to Debbie sitting next to me. I said, Debbie, is this person by any chance you? She laughed and she said, yes. So again, that was another interesting connection, that this was probably one of my most favorite articles that I had come across. And in less than a week after we arrived here, I'm sitting next to the author of that article and serving with her in that area of service.
And so, like, who were the other members of this committee, the child education committee?
You know, I can't remember because at that time I didn't know everybody's name. But this was what I can recall.
And what was the mandate of the committee?
At that time, it was a child education committee effort to train the teachers on the principles of education and on also areas that they could help parents to train their children. Well, at that time there was no material. There was literally no material as far as I remember. And this session that I'm sharing, it was just an oral presentation of a few committee members with the teachers who had come to attend. And these teachers had come from different parts of Kenya. So there wasn't any set material. Neither for teachers, nor for students, nor for parents. Sorry?
You were working okay.
I just arrived into it.
Okay, how do you feel now?
How do I feel?
Like so far, how do you feel?
From here or from you?
Yeah.
All of that was initiated in my heart by my parents and community where I lived. Turned to be what really was meant for me, and where it gave me a very, very happy feeling about my life. I cannot feel myself being anywhere else and be so happy and so in love with the people of that country. So I call myself a Kenyan. And it's very true by many, many standards, because by now I have lived most of my life, more years of my life in Kenya and in Africa than in anywhere else. And though Iran, being the most special country for any Baha'i in the world, stays so close to the heart, but I feel I'm dual nationality. I am Kenyan and I'm Iranian. Well, we found Baha'i community nice, interesting. We attended a few meetings at the Baha'i Center, and it was enjoyable. It was a mixture of different cultures and different parts of Kenya, people getting together. I enjoyed, and it was a good beginning. I remember when we just arrived to Nairobi, not knowing people, not knowing where we were going to live. We came with literally 2 suitcases and 1 bag. And my husband and I and our son, Omid, at the time, he was 5.5 years. And he was very much looking forward to have his 6th year celebration in Africa. Yes, Susan was the one at that time going to the Baha'i Center, and I asked her that we want to go travel out because we're coming from Philippines, very much used to going to the harbor. And then she said that no, we haven't been anywhere, but we have a gardener in Kisii, and that's the time that we started going to Kisii. Because later on we realized that literally every week, I remember Mehraz would go, and there were some pioneers and friends going.
And in some of your visits, like, do you have any particular stories about some of the visits that you went to?
So my husband and I were interested to stay in a part of Kenya that our services would be more required, an area with less number of Baha'is. So one of the places that was suggested to us was Nakuru, and we moved there. One of the highlights of our initial stay is that I went to the Baha'i Center, and at that time Dr. Malakuti and his family were living there. And Dr. Malakuti, being an auxiliary board member, I approached her and I said, Doctor, we have come here, and which area do you think I can be of service to? And he pointed to a corner of the Baha'i Center that a few children, ages 3, 5, 7, 10, 11, were sitting together with a teacher, and they were studying The New Garden, an introductory book about Bahá'í faith. And I was a little bit surprised that from age of 3 to 15, they were sitting and studying a book that belongs to a new Bahá'í or a person who would like to be introduced to the Bahá'í faith. And I said, but doctor, they don't seem to be having a children's class. There doesn't seem to be any material for children. He said, yes, that is why I'm saying this is the area we need. And that was the beginning of my service in this continent, in this country, on the area of child education, and literally on being a teacher of children's classes, which lasted for 28 years, which is probably among the highlights of my humble services here.
When did you arrive in Nakuru?
So after 1 year, few months, we moved. We stayed in Nairobi, and then we moved to Nakuru.
So 82.
It should be 82, yes, 82.
Your particular memories of the Menu Teaching Institute. You remember Menu Teaching Institute?
Yes,
You've been there.
yes.
Any memories of that?
Well, the beauty of that Baha'i Center at the time, and I understand it's now a proper institute, the hills, the nature, and then the radiance of Baha'is, yes. And then I know that they had beautiful choirs, yes. They still do, yes, yes. Yes, and of course food, food fresh, being served, being cut from the garden and prepared, beautiful.
When did you visit Menu?
Several times we have been to Menu, yes. But more than Menu, several times we went to Tricky West and Matunda Soy. We had a lot of teacher training courses, not only for children's classes, but for pre-primary schools. And then we would spend every time that we would spend between 5 days to 1 week. Teachers would prepare educational materials, posters. Those days we couldn't go to a supermarket and buy alphabet or number or sorting activities. Yes, we would make it together. They were very beautiful. I remember the times that all the teachers sitting in different corners, singing Baha'i songs and making toys, educational toys for their class. Very, very, very inspiring moments.
Do you remember the meeting of the conferences that you attended a few years after you arrived?
Yes, there were very many conferences had taken place at that time. Actually, Nakuru Center was the center of all activities. So when we moved to Nakuru, we had 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year meetings with people coming from all over Africa. At that time, a dormitory was built, and it could accommodate some slightly over 100 people. And yeah, that was the joy of our life. That every now and then there was an occasion, National Women Conference, National Child Education Conference, and of course conventions, and very, very many different conferences taking place. So we were very privileged to live there, because in no time it gave us a chance to see and become familiar and good friends with people across the country. So one of my outstanding experience that during 14-15 years that we lived in Nakuru, every Sunday our program was that we would go as a family I would be staying with children, with a couple of other teachers. We were teaching different classes, and my husband and two other friends who had cars will go to the neighborhood areas, teaching the faith or deepening, visiting Baha'i friends. So at times I felt like I was really stuck.
Like the Baha'i
as though not only at the Baha'i Center I was stuck with certain age group that I could communicate with. And I didn't have the heart to leave my class, because each one of our teachers were taking group of children. Then we had the assemblies together, so I didn't want to miss. But I felt like it was years after years, and I was wondering that is there any improvement going to be done in my services? However, years passed, and I got the answer very clearly. Sadly, a big number of those areas that were met at those days didn't continue, didn't stay, and it was pre-institute time. So of course it's obvious that why this was the wisdom of the House of Justice, to suggest to us another way of approaching people. But those children that we stayed weeks after weeks and after weeks, one of them being the person who is interviewing me, they grew up, and then they stayed under the light of the faith, and then they're serving in different parts of the world, including in the country. So that was a very, very interesting experience that I felt I share. That whatever we do with children, it's something that stays for a very long time. It's going a long way.